Honorable Senators, the results of the division are as follows. Ayes 26 votes, nays 0, abstention 0. So the ayes have it. Clerk, we shall now resume by taking order number 7B. Sergeant at Arms, kindly withdraw the bar and open the doors. Majority Leader, you may take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 57-1 to present to the Senate the business of the House for the week commencing Tuesday, the 27th of February, 2024. During the morning sittings on Wednesday, 21st February, 2024, the Senate considered and passed 7 bills. Mr. Speaker, I think that is a record. I don't recall a time before where in one sitting we have succeeded to pass 7 bills in one sitting. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, from the bottom of my heart, allow me to appreciate colleague senators for that stellar performance this week on Wednesday. We passed the County Licensing Uniform Procedures Bill, a very important bill that provides for the uniform application of licensing procedures in all our 47 counties, and you understand the difficulties that have been existing. The County Agricultural Livestock Extension Services Bill, very important bill for our farmers, and that colleagues passed. The Manx Bill, Startup Bill, Persons with Disability Bill, Kenya Sign Language Bill, and equally important, the Equalization Fund Appropriation Bill. 7 bills that colleagues have passed. The bills now have been referred to the National Assembly for consideration. I take this opportunity to commend honorable senators for their zeal and dedication in the presence of the chamber for the voting process, and urge all of us to carry on with the same spirit during this particular session. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are currently 33 bills at the second reading stage and 4 at the committee of the whole stage. These bills will be scheduled in the order paper and programs for the business of the coming week. I urge honorable senators to please familiarize themselves with this, with the order paper for every sitting day, to take interest in the coming business as indicated in the notice paper, and to avail themselves in the chamber to contribute meaningfully to debates. I cannot overemphasize on the needs for the movers to avail themselves in the chamber to prosecute business. This is a worrying trend, Mr. Speaker, which I believe we need to address. You find a senator has a bill, it's on the order paper, but they cannot be found to move. That's an unfortunate occurrence, Mr. Speaker, and I hope our colleagues who have various bills that are in various stages make sure that you're present in the House for consideration of those particular bills. I also reiterate, Mr. Speaker, on the importance for senators to get the order paper way in advance. I must commend the office of the clerk. We get the order paper every evening before the sittings, and sometimes even a day or two earlier. And you're able to tell what business is before the House. The SBC meets more than a week in advance. They prepare the legislative business, and therefore, there is no excuse, Mr. Speaker, for senators not to contribute meaningfully, Mr. Speaker, not just to rise and respond based on rumors, Mr. Speaker. This, by the time we are 1.5 years into your term, Mr. Speaker, I expect to see colleagues with Senate colleagues, Mr. Speaker, with notes that they have prepared prior to coming to debate in this House, with factual findings about why they agree or disagree with certain provisions that are in a particular bill, Mr. Speaker. The business of just casually walking into the chamber one afternoon, then listening to sometimes information or misinformation that has been peddled out there about a bill and reacting to it, Mr. Speaker, should be a thing of the past. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that all our debates in the House be informed by fact, either in support or in opposition. It doesn't matter, but convince us with sound logic, Mr. Speaker, on that particular. There are 20 bills, Mr. Speaker, 20 petitions rather, my apologies, Mr. Speaker, that are due for reporting by the various respective standing committees. I continue to urge the standing committees to expedite consideration of these petitions and to table their reports thereon pursuant to Standing Order number 238-2. I wish to reiterate that the importance of petitions as a tool to facilitate our Kenyan people to exercise their rights under Article 37 and Article 119 of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. With respect to statements, there are a total of 271 statements sought pursuant to Standing Order number 53-1 and are pending conclusion. The standing orders with specific reference to the Standing Order 56-1 provides a mechanism for which committee chairpersons may appraise the House on matters for which the committee is responsible. Further, Standing Order number 56-1A AA provide for a mechanism for committees
Order,
to...
Senator Nyutu. You may sit next to the Senator from Nyandarua and consult in Lawton. Proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. I urge standing committees to make use of these provisions to update the House on the various business. Mr. Speaker, this is a call to our various chairpersons of the various committees to consider seriously the bills that are before them and to guide the House on what they are doing with those particular bills. Mr. Speaker, you'll recall that this week, for example, was very heated debate on the water amendment bill, only for the committee to later appear before the House with a report responding complete with amendments, Mr. Speaker, on the issues which senators had taken with the particular bill. If we had that report early in advance and members were appraised of all these particular issues, I want to believe that many of them would not have raised some of the issues that they have. Therefore, I wish to urge our committee chairpersons to endeavor to ensure that they provide reports to the House way in advance before a particular bill is considered, Mr. Speaker. This is a busy season for which I expect that all our members of the Senate shall be seated in their respective House committees, Mr. Speaker, so as to dispense of business quickly. At its meeting held on the Tuesday, the 20th of February 2024, the SBC noted apologies from the Cabinet Secretary scheduled to appear on the morning sitting of Wednesday, 21st. To this end, the committee maintained the same set of questions scheduled for the day to appear in the order paper of the morning sitting of Wednesday, the 28th. The summary of the questions and the Cabinet Secretary to appear on the day as follows. Question number 1 by Senator Professor Tom Odinga to the CS for Interior on the intercommunal clashes that occurred in Sondu Town during the demonstrations in June and July 2023. Question number 2 by Senator Mwenda Gataya Mofaya to the Cabinet Secretary on the operationalization of Chiakariga sub-county in Tharaka Nithi County. Question number 3 by Senator Professor Tom Odinga to the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture on the theft of cane at way bridges while in transit to sugar factories. Question number 4 by Senator Professor Odinga to the CS for Agriculture on the appointment and dismissal of directors and managing directors and CEOs in state-owned sugar companies in Kenya. Last but not least is a question by Senator James Murango to the CS in charge of water, sanitation and irrigation on water projects budgeted by the national government in Kirinyaga County in financial year 2023-2024. Finally, on Tuesday the 27th, 2024, the SBC will consider and approve the business of the week. I thank you and hereby lay the statement on the table of the Senate today, Thursday the 22nd of February 2024. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before the clerk calls the next order, allow me to make the following communication. In the public gallery, we have 43 students, accompanied by 2 lecturers from the University of Embu Environmental Club, who are undertaking an education visit in the Senate. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the Senator for Embu, Senator Mundigi, under 1 minute, Senator, to extend words of welcome.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa ruhusa nikaribishe wanafunzi wa chuo kikuu ya Embu wakuja wajifunze sitaki kuongea mengi kwa sababu mmeona vile kulikuwa mko na bahati, mmekaa hapa karibu risali moja, kwa hivyo mmejifunza ya kutosha. Kwa hiyo namkaribisha. Nikimalizia nataka nimwambie mkirundi ndio muwe senator wa kesho ama leaders wa kesho, mambo ya pombe, dawa za kulevya, hizo zote mkiendelea nazo hamtaweza kukaa vizuri. Ya mwisho vile mmeona hapa ikiendelea, tuko hapa tuko kitu kimoja. Kuna senator walio wachache na walio wengi, lakini tuko kitu kimoja. Tukitoka huko nje ni mnaona kuna kuanga na sinda, lakini tuko kitu kimoja. Asanti. Mkirundi muende mpeane salamu ya senators wote kutoka Senate ya Kenya. Asanti Bwana Speaker.
Thank you. Next order, Clerk.
Order number 10, the Water Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 33 of 2023.
That order is deferred. Next order.
Order number 11, the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 37 of 2023, second reading.
Senator Osotsi, you're the mover of this bill. You may now proceed to reply. There is no senator wishing to make any contributions. Okay. Senator Osotsi, just take your seat. Senator Cheriot, you queued after I had made my communication. Anyway, proceed to make your contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You are right, and thank you for agreeing to indulge me. This is a very important bill which we should not allow to pass without giving our thoughts to it. A proposal by Senator Godfrey Osotsi, member for Vihiga, to amend the Powers and Privilege, Parliamentary Powers and Privilege Act, Mr. Speaker, to give effect to Article 125 of the Constitution by operationalizing the powers of arrest by Parliament, and Article 50 of the Constitution on the right to a fair hearing and connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, this is an important act of Parliament, which I want to agree, though I'll have certain thoughts which I think were Senator Osotsi. And this is something which Senator Cherargei, Senator Lelegwe, and I'm trying to see other jailbirds in the House, Mr. Speaker. I cannot notice jailbirds of the previous regime. People who have suffered the very, Mr. Speaker, inhumane and totally irresponsible acts of the excesses of the police, Mr. Speaker, as honorable members of Parliament. This is something for which I think we can easily cross ranks. A honorable member, Mr. Speaker, is not an ordinary citizen, not because you are elected, but because you speak on and on behalf and for behalf of other people, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, in going about your duties, many are the times for which you will be caught in certain situations for which, if it was upon your individual choice, Mr. Speaker, you may not have been there. But in your duties as you represent other people, there are places you'll have to go. There are things you'll have to say. You know, Mr. Speaker, there are people you'll have to rub the wrong way on behalf of the people that you speak for, Mr. Speaker. And that is not an easy exercise. And therefore, the casual nature with which I see members of Parliament many times just arrested, you know, from bars and I don't know what, dragged, as used to happen in the dreaded days of the handshake, Mr. Speaker, is something that we need to lay behind, so that members of Parliament, just like other ordinary citizens, can feel that they enjoy the very rights under our Constitution that we so proudly enjoy, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this is an attempt to provide for clear channels of how members of Parliament specifically are treated during time when police, for one reason or the other, want to attract your attention. I have never understood, Mr. Speaker, why Subarus and Land Cruisers, Mr. Speaker, will be chasing a honorable member of parliament around town trying to get their attention. Yet, you know, all it takes is just a phone call. If it is Senator Metho that you want, you just drop a phone call to him and say, you are needed at Dondori police station. You are wanted because there are sacks of potatoes that disappeared and we think you may know a thing or two about them. Why do you have to come and embarrass him in this town, Mr. Speaker? Chase him around like a common criminal. Somebody who represents millions of people, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I want to agree. There are not very many things that I agree with Senator Osotsi. But this, at least on that particular provision and to give right to Article 50, I must agree with him, Mr. Speaker, and urge colleagues that on this very important issue, let us close ranks. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the clerk, in fact, it provides for ways through which you can provide the summon at any given time because of our staffers and the records that are available in the precincts of Parliament. In whichever part of the world where we are in, Mr. Speaker, the office of the clerk is always aware where members are. Be it that we are on recess, we are on holiday, or even in terms of session, such as now. Therefore, this provision to provide that the clerk shall cause summons to be served within 7 days of receipt of directives, such that when you are needed, it is important to inform, you know, the clerk and say, we need member XYZ, please tell him to appear before such and such a police station in a nice and decent way. And I expect, Senator Osotsi, that we don't stop at members of Parliament alone. That needs to be the norm even for ordinary citizens, except for criminals who are on the run. There is no need, all this drama that we see many at the times about running around. You know, policemen sometimes, Mr. Speaker, are just excited about humiliating ordinary citizens, Mr. Speaker. And we need not stop at just members of Parliament alone. There are people, many citizens, Mr. Speaker, who if invited to, they'll be willing to walk to a station and either record a statement or do whatever police are looking for them. That is part of the reform. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, when CS Kindiki comes to the House next week, these are part of the promises that we made even as an administration, that there needs to be decency even in how people are arrested, Mr. Speaker, be it for whatever crime that they have committed, Mr. Speaker. Because that is what happens in developed worlds. Unless you're a criminal and a fugitive on the run, I don't see a reason why, Mr. Speaker, police officers must use public money, taxpayers' money, to hunt people around, running around, and to come into people's home, as opposed to using better means, Mr. Speaker, that is cheap, affordable. We are talking about austerity measures, Mr. Speaker. That ought to be part of the austerity measures. How much fuel do some of these police stations burn? Just hunting around people who, with one phone call worth 2 shillings or 3 shillings, they will have found their way to that particular police station, Mr. Speaker. And this is part of the reform which I hope in the tenure of a very good distinguished Senator, Majority Leader Emeritus, Senator Professor Kithure Kindiki, we shall see, Mr. Speaker. Then, Mr. Speaker, you move on to clause 3, that despite the provisions of subsection 5A, the relevant house or its committee may require a person to appear before it within a shorter period, as it may determine taking into account the urgency of matter before the house of a committee. This is when Parliament is in need of a particular individual, and for one reason or the other, they are looking for an opportunity for you to present yourself, you know, that there is a matter that they feel that your attendance or otherwise is needed, Mr. Speaker, and that is extremely important. Section 4, Mr. Speaker, is just an amendment of the Principal Acts, a clean up, you know, where witnesses are given opportunity to be heard prior to the impositions of fines. Verifying, these are basics of law, Mr. Speaker. The fine shall be a civil debt recoverable summarily in accordance with the debts, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, finally, is on section 5, where an order of arrest is to be effected by a police officer. The clerk shall transmit the order to the Inspector General for execution. This is now when, if the clerk have reached out to you, they cannot find you, Mr. Speaker, then they'll be left with no option other than to inform them that we cannot reach this particular person, and therefore find your ways. A person under arrest, Mr. Speaker, shall be held at a place as specified in the National Police Service Act or designated by the clerk for purposes of holding such persons. Mr. Speaker, a Parliament police station will be such an ideal place for such occurrence, Mr. Speaker, where for one reason or the other, you can find yourself that instead of arresting Senator Osotsi and taking him to Limuru here, and you know he comes from Vihiga, a very warm part of the country, if you place him in Limuru police station, he can easily lose consciousness because of the cold of the night, Mr. Speaker. That's why a more familiar environment, like the police station in Parliament here, Mr. Speaker, will form a particular holding place of importance. Same can be said of all of us, Mr. Speaker, because we know all these things, that today it happens to members on this side, the following day it's members on the other side. Therefore, it's important to make this possible. In this subsection, officer of the House of Parliament means any officer acting under the orders of the respective speaker or duly authorized by the respective clerk. These are just consequential amendments. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this is an important amendment, something that we have discussed for a long time but have never actualized, Mr. Speaker, giving decency to members of Parliament so that we enjoy and we are not stopped on our streets in going about our duties. There are many people who are not happy with the decisions we take on matters that appear before this House, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it is important that members of Parliament, in going about their duties, feel free to represent their people. They don't feel intimidated by anyone, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I want to appreciate this proposal. There is also something else that Senator Osotsi, I don't agree with you. When you want to impose, I have always said this in the past, 500,000 for somebody who has snubbed the summons of Parliament is a slap on the wrist. The people who snub parliamentary summons are arrogant and rich. So even the 2 million that you're asking for, in my humble opinion, is too little. Somebody must feel there must be a price to pay for anybody who's not being responsive and dishonoring summons to Parliament, be they public officers or whoever. Once Parliament has summoned you, Mr. Speaker, Parliament is a gathering of the people of Kenya. When the people of Kenya say they want to have a meeting with you and they have issued a summon, there is provided in procedure, Mr. Speaker, what a summon is. You know, it should be distinguished to the ordinary citizen so that people don't confuse. There is a difference between an invite to appear and a summon. By the time it gets to a summon, Mr. Speaker, is because you have dishonored invites several times, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I think 2 million, Senator Osotsi, is still little. We need to be tough. There are people who are owed this money. No. That's another point which I don't want to lose. First of all, you need to increase the money. And secondly, we need to provide mechanisms of recovering this money, Mr. Speaker. I know, and the office of the clerk can correct me, there are public officers that we find for non-appearance. There are governors that we find for non-appearance last time, Mr. Speaker. And up to date, as we speak, to the best of my knowledge, they haven't paid. I wish we would have provided here, Senator Osotsi, for ways of recovering that money. The way in a court of law, if you are found to have dishonored a fine, Mr. Speaker, the court finds way of either selling goods that are known to you or finding way of enforcing this particular fine. So, Senator Osotsi, before we conclude on third reading, that is something which I want to plead with you. Increase the amount to something like 5 million Kenya shillings, and also ways of enforcing, Mr. Speaker, so that we find ways of compelling people to pay that particular fine. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support and appreciate the industry that has gone to into the thinking of making this bill. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Moruma.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa hii fursa umenipa ili kuunga mkono huu mswada wa Parliamentary Powers and Privileges ambao umeletwa na Senator wa Busia wa Vihiga, Senator Osotsi. Kusema ukweli, huu ni mswada mzuri ambao unapatia uhai ibara ya 125 ya katiba